الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ومن يعش عن ذكر الرحمن نقيض له شيطانا فهو له قرين وإنهم ليصدونهم عن السبيل ويحسبون أنهم مهتدون حتى إذا جاءنا قال يا ليت بيني وبينك بعد المشرقين فبئس القرين صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, a second loud salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. For the hastening and the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه. The topic that we will be discussing tonight, inshallah, is titled Spiritual Freedom and Spiritual Captivity. And this ties in specifically when on a night like this and on a day like this where we, having passed beyond the ashab and the companions of the Imam, we look at the sacrifice that the Imam himself has made on a day like this. When you look at the conversations that Imam al-Hussein is having on his way from Medina to Mecca and from Mecca when he sets out on this journey, you will find there is a number of conversations that are narrated from him. And many of these conversations, most of the lines in them are normal lines that you would find in any conversation between a person who is setting out on a journey, he is setting out on a trip. But sometimes you will find amongst these lines, lines that are critical, lines that are more than just a line in a conversation. The Imam is actually introducing the movement behind this trip. He's introducing why he set out on this movement anyways. In some of these lines we discussed last night, that famous line or that famous wasiyah that he made to his brother Muhammad Hanafiya, he said, وَإِنِّي لَمْ أَخْرُجْ أَشِرًا وَلَا بَطِرًا, I am not leaving for this reason or that reason. The only reason why I am leaving is because I want to bring about reform in the ummah of my great-grandfather. Then amongst these lines that you find from the beloved Imam, you will also find certain concepts that are reoccurring themes in what the Imam is saying. There are certain concepts that come up over and over again. And one of those concepts that comes up over and over again is the concept of freedom. You find this, for example, on the 10th of Muharram, the Imam, according to some narrations, these lines are attributed to the Imam, that he turned to the troops of Umar ibn Sa'ad and he said, وَيْحَكُمْ يَا شِيعَةَ آلَ أَبِي سُفْيَانَ إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَكُمْ دِينٌ, if you have no faith and no religion, فَكُونُوا أَحْرَارًا فِي دُنْيَاكُمْ, then let you be free human beings when it comes to your dunya. Let you be free human beings when it comes to your lifestyle. And amongst these lines that we also read from the Imam is the famous line where he declared the situation and he drew a portrait for us of the situation that he's in. He said, "Ala wa inna ad-da'i ibn ad-da'i qad rakaza bayna ithnatayn." This man, Yazid, he has placed us between two options, two situations. Bayna as-sillati wa dhilla. He has placed us bayna as-silla. Silla means when you take the sword out of its cover, when you prepare for war. بين السلة والذلة. He has placed us either between war and battle or الذلة. And then he uttered those four words that were very well known to us. Many of us might have them on our shirts. وَهَيْهَاتَ مِنَّ الذِّلَّةِ. And we're not choosing humiliation. So the only other option is going to be to go to war and to go to battle. So you find the Imam talks about not being humiliated. He talks about being a free individual. And that is what we want to discuss. Because when you look at the movement of the Imam, you find that it doesn't seem from a physical perspective that he was free at all. At the end of the day, if you look at the plains of Karbala from a purely materialistic perspective, you find an Imam who was massacred. You find companions who were massacred. 70, 80 on one side, thousands on the other side. This battle took only a portion of the day. So when he talks about being a free individual while his women and children end up being captives, this is not the normal freedom that he is referring to. There's a deeper layer to this discussion. There's a particular type of freedom that he is referring to, and that is spiritual freedom. But we throw around this word of spiritual freedom a lot of times. We don't even know exactly what it means. And we also don't know, how do you attain that spiritual freedom? In other words, how do you even walk in the footsteps of the Imam? You say, yes, it's very important to be spiritually free. But we don't know what that means on a practical level. How does one attain that? How does one go about that? That is the topic that we will be discussing tonight, inshallah. And we will do so by posing the following questions. What is spiritual freedom? And when you say you are spiritually free, what are you free from? Because whenever you talk about freedom, there is something that's trying to captivate you. There is something that is trying to bring about your isara, something that is trying to make you asir, something that's trying to limit you. You are free from that thing. When you are spiritually free, what is it that you are free from? Number two, what are the different stages of a person who loses his spiritual freedom? And what are the different stages of a person who develops his spiritual freedom? Number three, what examples do we have from the history of Karbala of individuals who had lost their spiritual freedom and they ended up doing things on the 10th of Muharram, like a day like this? They ended up doing things that deep down they in themselves may have not wanted to, but because they had completely lost their spiritual freedom, they did those things anyways. And number four, what examples do we have from our great maraji' of individuals who developed the highest levels of spiritual freedom, such that when it came to those moments that they had to make the most critical decisions, because they were spiritually free from their desires, they were able to make those decisions in the best of ways. Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these four questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allow us to begin from here. If you were to ask the average person, what does it mean that you are free? What does it mean that you have freedom? He will simply tell you, whatever I choose to do, whatever I desire to do, whatever I wish to do, I can do it. There is no one stopping me. If I decide to go left or I decide to go right, if I decide to have this for dinner or that for dinner, if I decide to go to this place or that place, no one can stop me. And based on this definition, your desires, your wishes, those things that you want are the very source of your freedom. As long as you can do as you wish, as long as you can do based on your desires, you are a free human being based on the normal definition of this word. But when it comes to spiritual freedom, things start to change. They start to take a little bit of a turn. And it's a very beautiful discussion because Islam pictures this whole discussion for us in a very beautiful way. In Islam, this same desire of yours that used to be the source of your freedom, you do as you wish, people say you're free. Islam says, you know what, if you want to be spiritually free, you have to be careful that that same desire doesn't become the source of your captivity. How is that possible? I thought whatever I do, whatever I want to do, I do it, therefore I'm free. You're saying my desires, the things I want, are now going to become the source of my captivity. They're going to hold me back. Yes, that's how desires work. And this is the perspective that Islam gives to us. Islam says, and this is the main concept that I want to convey tonight. Islam says these desires that you and I have, if you continue to fulfill them without any limitation, this desire goes from just being a desire to being a habit. If you continue down that road a little bit more, that habit then turns into an addiction. Once it turns into an addiction, even if you don't want to do it, you kind of have to do it. Even if deep down you sit there and you say, you know what, this is the wrong thing to do, but because at this point I am addicted to this behavior, I can't hold back anymore. It's too compelling for me. And we'll give you examples of those who were in Karbala, how were their situation ended up in that situation. What happened that the likes of Umar ibn Sa'd ended up in Karbala? Did Umar ibn Sa'd want to kill the son of Fatima from the beginning? No, it wasn't like that. He ended up for a different reason in the plains of Karbala. Islam says any desire that you have, if you just continue to fulfill it, turns into a habit, turns into an addiction. When that addiction is strong, even when you know it's wrong, even when there's something more important you have to do, you can't stop yourself because you have this addiction now. Yes, it's too compelling of a force. An example of this, a good example of this is coffee. You start out, the first time you have coffee, it's wonderful. You get you get the energy, you feel a little pumped today, wonderful. The caffeine is flowing through the veins and everything. Then after a while, you start doing it more and more often, every day, twice a day, 3 times a day. Then it starts turning into a habit. If you continue down that road, it starts to turn into an addiction. I know addiction is a powerful word, but just bear with me as I go through other examples that Islam will consider an addiction. Then it becomes so compelling that it's almost as if you can't function unless you have your coffee. You've seen those shirts? Don't talk to me before I get my coffee. It reaches a point where this person is like, listen, I can't even function. If I don't have my coffee in the morning, I'm going to have a headache. I'm not going to have energy. I can't do anything. For some, it's coffee. For some, it's their chai or shy or whatever you want to call it. It's different things. But that same desire that initially you would have it, you say, I'm a free person. I can do whatever I want to do. You fulfill it too much, it turns into what? It turns into an addiction. And Islam says every single desire of ours can become like this. The problem, though, that we have in the culture and in the society that we live in is that this culture and society in some ways doesn't even have the terminology and the wording to refer to these desires that have turned into addictions as addictions. Because when I use the word addiction, what's the first thing that comes to our mind? It's a substance. I use a substance to give me, a sense of power, a sense of freedom, a sense of relaxing, whatever the case might be. Yes? Islam says that's one form of addiction. Any desire of yours, if you continue to fulfill it too much, it will turn into that same type of addiction. There are those, they are addicted to gaining wealth. This person will do anything and everything to add to his wealth. Doesn't matter. It's wonderful to compile wealth. There's nothing wrong with that in Islam. But this person won't stop at anything and everything. He's willing to do anything. No problem. Ruin lives? No problem. Ruin the reputation of the other business? No problem. Create problems for them? No problem. He's willing to do anything. Sometimes you look at this person and you say, this person is ruthless. Islam says this person is sick. He has an addiction. He's fulfilled this desire so much, this desire has taken a grip on his life. What do we say in this culture? We say he's a successful businessman. We don't even have the wording for it in this culture and this society. We don't even have the terminology for it. There are those, they are addicted to fame. This person is willing to do anything and everything to become famous. Anything and everything for the likes and the followers and the clicks and so on and so forth. You and I look at this person and say, this person is famous. Islam says this person is sick, he is ill, has an addiction. You just don't have the wording for it in our language. There's a person, this person cannot lower his gaze, can't stay modest in his life. This has turned into a problem for him. In this society, they say, yes, this is normal, not a problem. Islam says this person is dealing with an addiction. It's so strong that even when he doesn't want to do it, he almost feels as though someone is forcing him to do it. And when we speak about spiritual freedom, this is what we mean. It means those desires, you stop them from controlling your life. Not an easy thing to do. But this is what Hussein is talking about. When he says, بَيْنَ السِّلَّةِ وَالذِّلَّةِ, I'm not a man who is humiliated. It's my desires, they don't dictate to me what I'm going to do. I do based on what I think is the best thing to do. This is what he's talking about. So then how do I attain this spiritual freedom on a very practical level? It might sound like an oxymoron. It might sound like a little bit of a contradiction. You want to be free, you have to limit yourself. That doesn't make sense. I want to be free. That's how spiritual freedom works. You want to be free, you got to limit your desires. To what extent though? Oh, that's the wonderful thing. Islam has told you exactly to what extent you have to limit them. To the extent that it becomes haram. It becomes haram, that's where you cut it off. That desire, Islam is saying if you go beyond this line, it's going to turn into an addiction for you. You can fulfill it to a certain extent. But Islam says if you go beyond this line, it's going to turn into a problem for you. I have a need or a desire to engage with the opposite direction, opposite gender. Islam says, well, up to this point, it's fine. You go beyond this, becomes haram all of a sudden. Because it's going to turn into an addiction for you. And all of the different desires that the human being has, they all fall under the same category. If I want to live a life where I am free, I have to limit myself. And this is the point that you sometimes feel like Western society is completely oblivious of. So I want to be free. No problem, be free. But just know that in this process where you want to be quote-unquote free, you're going to be doing what? You're going to be acting on these desires. Those desires will become the source of your captivity. You thought you were moving towards freedom. In reality, you're not. In reality, that desire will get the best of you at the end of the day. In reality, that desire will turn into an addiction. It will limit you more than you would have been if you had limited yourself to begin with. If you had limited that desire to begin with. This is spiritual freedom. And there are those who lose the spiritual freedom over the process of their life. The first stage of it is that this person doesn't want to do something, but his desires are so strong, it's almost as if his hands are tied. He can't stop himself. Then you move on to the second stage. This person, not only he does haram, even though deep down he knows this is ugly, he knows this is evil, but he still does the haram. Shaitan now comes to him and whispers to him what to do the haram in the best way. This is a real thing. The Quran says, وَإِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ لَيُوحُونَ إِلَىٰ أَوْلِيَائِهِمْ. The shayateen, they come and speak to their buddies. My translation, of course. They come and speak to them. They say, you know what? And it's a scary part. This might have happened for us as well, if we think about it. You know, you're going to mock your friend anyways, but if you say this, it will really get under his skin. You're going to get her back anyways, but if you say this, it will really have her break down. He will help this person. What can you do to create even more corruption, even more pain? This is a person who continues on the path of sinning without repenting. Shaitan starts to become, his right-hand man. Then the Quran says there's a third stage. This person, if he just continues on this, he reaches a point that the verses I mentioned from Surah Fussilat talk about, that this person is now breathing and living with shayateen. And the moment we hear that, we think about some jinn with some scary horns and oh my God, this jinn is living with him. No, this person, the shayateen are living with him. He doesn't even realize it. Nothing changes around him. Like he doesn't even feel a difference. Life is going on as usual. But he is sinning so much without repentance that shaitan day and night is mahshur with him. He is spending time with him. The Quran says, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ نُقَيِّضْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا. The one who turns away from us, we will appoint for him a shaitan. A specific shaitan. A special shaitan for him. And what do they do? وَإِنَّهُمْ لَيَصُدُّونَهُمْ عَلَى السَّبِيلِ وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. This shaitan is whispering in his ears days and night, And وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. He sits there and says, no, life is normal. I didn't see no jinn. I didn't see nothing. Everything is fine. حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَنَا. Until he comes to us on the day of judgment and he sees this shaitan who was breathing and living and sleeping and waking up with him. What does he say? He says, يَا لَيْتَ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ بُعْدَ الْمَشْرِقَيْنِ. How ugly and terrible are you. I wish there was the furthest distance between you and I. Because now he's realizing he was living with this being. He was breathing with this being. All of this starts from where? From sinning and not repenting. If someone goes to stage 1 and they repent, they stay at stage 1. But if this person goes to stage 1 and they don't repent and they just keep going and going, then they come to these ladder levels. Who was like this? Who had this addiction that he just could not give up? None but Umar ibn Sa'd in the plains of Karbala. Umar ibn Sa'd, he didn't set out saying, I'm going to kill the son of Fatima. That's not what he was thinking. He was just after the governance of the city of Ray. Say, you're going to become the governor of Ray. You sit up there, people come, they give you taxes, you do a couple orders, couple commands, a wonderful position. Ray was a big deal back in the day. He loved it. And before he could set out towards Ray, what happened? Ubaidullah called him. He said, listen, you have to go to Karbala and you got to deal with this whole Hussein situation we have going on. He said, no, I'm going to become the governor of Ray. I don't know what you're talking about. I want to go. He said, no, listen, if you don't go deal with him, there's no Ray for you. And he knew Umar ibn Sa'd was hooked to this governance. He was hooked to this position. So every time Umar ibn Sa'd said no, he said, okay, fine. We're going to give Ray to somebody else. We're giving that position to somebody else. And you can tell his hands start to shake all of a sudden. So what happened? He came to Karbala at the end of the day. Umar ibn Sa'd arrived in Karbala maybe 1st, 2nd, 3rd, somewhere around that time. Imam al-Hussein was martyred on the 10th of Muharram. We might have asked ourselves this question, what was happening all the way from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th Muharram? All of this time. Because the battle itself took what? Maybe 5-10 hours total. It's done. So thousands on one side, 80 on the other side, it's done. So what took so long? Umar ibn Sa'd took so long. Because Umar ibn Sa'd, even when he came to Karbala, he did not want to kill the son of Fatima. This was a scary notion to him. He didn't want to be that person. So when he came to Karbala, so many times he tried to approach Imam al-Hussein. Let's negotiate. Let's come to some sort of a solution. Yes? Let's see what happens. But he's getting that pressure from Ubaidullah that, well, you have to put an end to this whole situation faster. So much so, it came to 9th of Muharram, 10th of Muharram, letter came. Listen, if you're not going to take care of it, within your army, you will find someone like Shimr ibn Dhil Jawshan. If you can't take care of it, let him take care of it. If you're going to be taking so long, let him take care of it. And this is where that addiction got the best of him. Addiction to what? Some substance? No. Addiction for him, position. That was his. You and I have to ask, what's my addiction? Na'udhu billah. What's your addiction? God forbid. The letter came, said, listen, if you're not going to put an end to this, have Shim do it. That's why we send Shim. Shim is the lowest of the lowest. You tell him anything, he'll take care of it for you. And what happened to Umar ibn Sa'd? The same one who at the beginning said, I don't want to have anything to do with killing Hussein. He took out the first arrow on the 10th of Muharram. And he shot this arrow and he said, everyone bear witness to Amirul Mu'mineen that I was the one who started all of this. I'm getting the credit for all of this. See where this person started? Where he ended. Why? He lost his spiritual freedom. And this is the same one who ordered for the tents to be burnt on the 10th of Muharram. And he was the same one who ordered for the body to be trampled. But he didn't want to kill the son of Fatima initially, no. But when you lose your spiritual freedom, you do things that deep down you might look at and say, this is ugly, but I can't help it. It's almost as if his hands are tied. It's not. He has his free will, yes, but That's what happens when you let your desires get the best of you. When the critical time comes, you can't make the right decision. This is what happens when you lose spiritual freedom. Then there are those who develop their spiritual freedom. These individuals are different. And Shahid Mutahari speaks about this in his books. He says there are those, they develop their spiritual freedom. What's the first level of it? The first level is that their desires cannot push them to do things that they know are wrong. They stay away from the haram, if I'm putting it in simple terms. He has a desire to do something. It's haram, he's able to stay away from it. This first stage is very difficult. This first step is very difficult. This first step is probably 50 different steps put together in one step. He said this is the first stage. But I just mentioned this for you to know and for me to know the potential that the human being has. He says if the human being can master this step, then it comes to step number 2. Stage number 2, level number 2. What is that? He says the human being can reach a point where now he is controlling not just his actions, but his thoughts as well. His mind, his intellect, he can control. Doesn't want his mind to go in a certain direction, it won't go. This is a next level. Because actions you can control, yes? Thoughts is a different situation. Thoughts is like sometimes it almost feels like it's not even in your hands. That's how it feels to you and I. He says, no, if you continue down this path, then the thoughts. Then he says the third level then is this, that if this human being consistently continues down this path, he reaches a point where he can control his actions and his thoughts and natural phenomena around him. Now his control is exceeding his own existence. It is trickling down on the rest of the existence that he finds around him. And this is what you find. Our imams definitely had this, there's no doubt about it. And you find stories from different scholars. And the reality is these scholars, their stories are so many. At the end of the day, you and I might doubt this one or that one in terms of the specifics and all of that. But at the end of the day, the fact that scholars, some of them had this opinion, or had this power and this authority and this ability, there's no doubting that. There's too many stories to try to doubt. Yes? And sometimes they might not even be a scholar. Sometimes it might just be a person who's really, really strong in terms of their faith. Usually you'll hear the story of scholars more because they might be under, more, people paying attention more to them and so on. No, sometimes as a person, he's not an alim, he's better than 1,000 alims. It's just how it works. We don't know these things. It's a mysterious way how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala values different human beings. It's a topic for another time. But you and I look at certain individuals, say this person is here, this person is there. And if you were to take the lens of Allah and put that lens on your eyes, you look at people, sometimes it's the exact opposite of what you assumed. That's just a different thing. Our knowledge is so limited when it comes to the lives of others. We don't know. We assume we know where this person stands in the eyes of God. In reality, you look at it and say, oh my God, this is so different. That's why the day of judgment is definitely a day full of surprises. People look at one another and say, you're going ahead of me? I thought I was 10 times better than you. And the other person you look at and say, oh, you thought you're 10 times better than us. But you're over there. What? This is a day of surprises. It says, لا تخفى منكم خافية. Everything comes to light that day. He says there are individuals who have continued down this road. They attain this full spiritual freedom. And I want to share with you a story of one of the scholars who was able to attain this spiritual freedom. And because he had this spiritual freedom, when it came time to making the most critical of decisions, he almost felt 100% free, even though it was a decision that went against his desires. He could do it easily. And the moral of this story is, and inshallah I'll leave you with this as we bring this ashra to an end. The moral of the story, brothers and sisters, is that every single one of us here, every single one of us, is going to find themselves in critical situations where they have to make a decision. And if they have the right spiritual freedom, they'll make the right decision. If they don't, they will ruin the whole situation. Every single one of us will be in a situation like this. Every single one. It might be with my family, it might be with my relatives, it might be with my parents, it's different situations. Every single one of us will find ourselves in situations where there's a tough decision to be made, but I know what's right to be done. And if I haven't had that spiritual freedom, if I haven't been working on it, I'm going to mess up in that situation. You and I just have to think about when that situation presents itself. Ayatollah Kuh-Kamarei, a great scholar of Najaf and a marja. The story is about him. He was in the city of Najaf. If you're marja in the city of Najaf, back in the day, of course, this is, complete authority. People are willing to give their lives for your fatwa. He has a class that he teaches in the masjid. He comes to the masjid, teaches the class, so on and so forth. One day he comes to the masjid. He finds this other sheikh is sitting further away with clothing that is extremely modest. Almost not even presentable clothing. It's got holes in it, patches on it, so on and so forth. And he looks at him, he says, doesn't even know who the sheikh is. And he says, well, he's teaching over there, that's not a problem. I'm going to have my class over here. And, that day ends. He goes home, comes back the next day for class, and this time he is early to class. And when he's early to class, he sees the same sheikh sitting over there. Quick sneak peek, who is this sheikh who's sitting over there? This is Sheikh Al-Ansari. He's a heavyweight. But nobody knows him right now. He's going from city to city, Karbala, Najaf, other cities. He's teaching, he's learning, things of that nature. So Ayatollah Kuh-Kamarei sits there and says, well, I'm early. These students are going to take a while. I don't know who this sheikh is who's sitting here. I'm going to go sit in his class and see who is he, what is the content he is teaching, so on and so forth. The story says that he went and he sat in the class of Sheikh Al-Ansari. And as he was listening to Sheikh Al-Ansari, he said, wow, this is some stuff I don't even know. But I'm a marja, and I don't know this stuff. He's really good. And the more he sat there, the more he was convinced that Sheikh Al-Ansari is more knowledgeable than him. And he said, you know what? If someone like him is in town, he needs to be teaching. I shouldn't be teaching. So the class comes, they gather, he teaches that day, the next day comes. The students come again. And look at the spiritual freedom. Look at how free a human being is when he knows what the right thing is to do. If he's free, look at how easy it is for him to do it. All the students gathered. They said, Sheikh, if you can start your class. He said, I'm not teaching anymore. We are all going to go and sit in the class of Sheikh Al-Ansari. They say, you're a marja. What are you talking about? He said, I sat in his class. He's more knowledgeable than me. You all need to learn from him. We're going to cancel our class. We're going to go sit in his class because he's more knowledgeable than me. What did this Sheikh Al-Ansari become later on? This Sheikh Al-Ansari became a person who, anywhere you study, the books of the Hawza and you study in the seminary, and you want to get to advanced levels, you cannot go through advanced levels unless you go through the books of Sheikh Al-Ansari. It's like a major stepping stone of the Hawza of Qum and Najaf and Mashhad and every other city that you want to mention. If you want to get to advanced level of studies, you have to go through Makasib and Rasail. It's like part of your discussion. And slowly Sheikh Al-Ansari got to be known in the city of Najaf. People came to him. He became the leading scholar in many ways. His books became part of the heritage of the Hawza. Today, thousands of students, they go back to the books of Sheikh Al-Ansari. All of this because of what? Because one person had the spiritual freedom to admit the truth. Say, he's more knowledgeable than me. But that's only if you've been working on your spiritual freedom. And the same person, if he did not have that freedom, he would have made the worst decision in that situation. And that is a lesson for us. If you and I want to walk in the footsteps of the Imam, we have to work on that spiritual freedom. And it all begins from the basic halal and haram in our lives. All begins from there. If I'm able to implement that, I'm developing that spiritual freedom. When there comes the situation where I have to make a tough decision, I will be able to make that decision. And if I don't do that, then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents me with a situation like that, Na'udhu billah. Na'udhu billah, you and I, we will ruin the situation. We will mess up in those situations. With that, inshallah, I'll bring today's talk to an end. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we thank Him for giving us the opportunity to commemorate these 10 or 11 nights. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the tawfiq to be amongst the true followers of the Ahlul Bayt, insha'Allah. Pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of our brothers and sisters who are going through difficulty and pain in Lebanon, Afghanistan, China, other parts of the world, Palestine, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frees them from their difficulty and pain, insha'Allah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of those who have worked hard for these majalis, all of the other majalis going on in this community, other communities, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prolongs their lives, insha'Allah. And finally, last but not least, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hastens the return of our beloved 12th Imam. Before I end, I seek your forgiveness. Inshallah, if anything was said that came off, God forbid, disrespectful or harsh or whatever the case might be, inshallah, the brothers and sisters will please forgive me. Rahimallahu man qara'a Surah Al-Fatiha ma'a as-salawati ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.